Welcome in On Texas Football, a little special edition of the Recruiting Breakdown, sponsored by Mark Saunders, our good friend. Gerry Hamilton here with CJ Vogel, back on the air here at On Texas Football. We thought we'd talk a little bit of recruiting, right? CJ, it's our first recruiting show.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm ready for the future of what we get to cover in the Texas recruiting states. I mean, Gerry, obviously nice to have you back on the On Texas platform, so this is exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to hit on Steve Sarkisian. He's in DFW, which is has been the key staple in recruiting for Texas since Sark and Jeff Banks got to Texas. I include Jeff Banks in that because Jeff Banks was a huge hire for Sark and is big in the DFW area along I-20 while he was at Alabama and at A&M and previous stops. So we'll talk about where Sark's at in DFW. We're also going to talk about where else he's been this week because there's some key visits out of state with committed guys who are still being pursued by many of the nation's top programs. But we're going to start with this morning's breaking news. Chris Lowe of ESPN reporting that Billy Glasscock, director of player personnel at Texas, is expected to take a GM role, similar role, or new role at Ole Miss. CJ, I kind of want to get your initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, the general manager role in the world of college football is a bit new. You know, you talk about the importance of constructing a roster in terms of high school recruiting, going into the portal, and obviously having to balance all of that out with NIL opportunities and roster management. That's kind of where this GM role kind of falls into from what I understand. It's a little bit different than what Texas has right now. Brandon Harris is obviously the director of recruiting, and then you mentioned Billy Glasscock was the director of player personnel. That was more of what you would see in terms of the high school recruiting and the portal recruiting. So a little bit of a change up right now. Texas is obviously recruited at a very high level over the last couple of cycles, and a little change up in that personnel department. A bit of a hurdle right now. Sarkisian on the road, as we're about to talk about, hearing this news right now, headed to an SEC foe. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. One, if you're a college got director of player personnel being now with more GM roles coming in college football, that's good news for you working to the NFL one day, by the way, if that's what your ultimate goals are in one of those roles, because you are really doing the job of an NFL guy at this point with the portal, with free agency or NIL, whatever you want to call it. I call it free agency, right? I mean, you're almost working in that role, kind of tuning up for a future move to the NFL, if that's what you want to do. The other one will be interesting is, what does Sark do? Does Brandon Harris move to director of player personnel? J.M. Jones, currently the assistant to Billy Glasscock, does he take over more of a director of recruiting? Do they tag team both of those jobs? It'll be interesting to see what Sark does. Does he go outside? We'll have to see what he does. I think Brandon Harris has been well received by Sarkisian. He puts a lot on Brandon's plate, obviously, right? When they were down a man on the staff, who went on the road recruiting? Brandon Harris.
Exactly.
So that tells you how much, how highly he's thought of by Steve Sarkisian. Obviously, J.M. Jones working under Billy Glasscock there as his assistant director of player personnel, knows the ropes, knows the jobs, knows everything that Glasscock's done to be successful and help Texas be successful. So that'll be interesting. So that's just a couple of CJ and I's thoughts on that. But now we're going to turn to high school recruiting for a second. Before I do that, though, I want to take a second for Mark Saunders. The Texas All-State agent, Mark Saunders, is the sole sponsor of the Recruiting Breakdown. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some great news. Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you need to help keep tabs on protection for all your stuff. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and even your ATV. Call Texas All-State agent Mark Saunders' office today. 512-218-8571. Are you in good hands? With over 35 years experience, you will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. Give him a call again, 512-218-8571. All right, CJ, Sark in DFW, man. Do we need to have a list? You need to have a board behind you in your room, like every name from DFW. You're a DFW guy that Sark and Banks have recruited to Texas since they've been there. Multiple 5 stars, Colin Simmons, Jonte Cook, Anthony Hill, multiple guys ranked top 50, top 100 in the country, Malik Muhammad. The list goes on and on and on. Tom Herman, previous staff, did not do a good job in DFW. Banks and Sark have totally flipped the script, and the rest of the staff. But this is why DFW is so important. It's the most talented area in the state year in, year out right now. Houston's very talented in 2025. But DFW, especially along I-20, is just a different level right now. All you have to see, watch is DeSoto, Duncanville, watch the playoff games, watch what transpires, and how many guys sign. So Sark being in DFW is big. And he was seeing Michael Fasusi, 5-star offensive lineman, the top offensive tackle on the board in 2025 from Louisville. It's an interesting recruitment, CJ, because when we began the 2023 season, Texas and Oklahoma were the two teams. And I think Texas was out in front of Oklahoma. Those are the two teams. And Mike Elko's hired at A&M. They get him on campus pretty quick. Elko goes to Louisville really early on in the process because they're trying to get guys on campus, which is a smart move at the time. Then Fasusi doesn't come to Texas Junior Day on the 20th and instead goes to Missouri. Then he's been to Oregon. But where this recruitment's at right now, CJ, I think Texas coming in late as far as the head coach visits was probably planned all along.
I think so. I think you're absolutely right in the sense that there's a lot on his plate very early. You had 3 straight weekends of visits, a lot to look forward to on the weekend. Obviously, during those weeks, you're visited by just about every coach in the region, let alone the country, coming in to say hello to Michael Fasusi and his coaching staff for a good reason. Sarkisian kind of slow played this one. You look back at the season, Fasusi was on campus a number of times dating back to July and August, those visit weekends Texas would have on campus. There was also the video and picture that was posted after the win at Alabama of Fasusi and Sarkisian on the phone together right after the win. So Texas was in a very good position back in the beginning of the season. Obviously, as this open window starts, allowing the mayhem to go on the road, smart move by Sarkisian to knock out a few places around the state of Texas, as well as some national prospects, and then circling back to Fasusi for some one-on-one time. The day after, Kyle Flood was there. And so there's a little bit of a 1-2 punch going on for the Texas staff as things have quieted down through the hallways of Louisville High School. So I like the approach a lot. And I think for a guy as talented as a Fasusi, it's worth looking outside the box in ways to get, more of those one-on-one opportunities to sit down and talk with them.
And for Texas fans just getting familiar with these 2025 guys, the juniors in high school, Fasusi is a left tackle prospect, not right tackle. He is a true left tackle prospect with the high-end pass protection, feet, bend, body quickness. He's an elite pass protection prospect. I'm going to throw a little nugget out here at the end of this one before we move on to where else Sark's been. June 25th through 27th weekend, I think is already going to start lining up to be the big official visit weekend. I think Texas is targeting the last official visit on some guys like Fasusi. Some of these guys we're going to be talking about in the future. Marcus Harris from Mater Dei. It's already been reported that he plans to visit Texas June 25th through 27th. Can all this change? Sure. But I would say right now chances are pretty high that Fasusi will be on campus that weekend in Austin. And I'll throw another one out there. His father was at the meeting with Sark. His father has not been at all the meetings. There's too many coaches come through. So that's another good news nugget there for Texas, is that the father came to meet with Sark, and I think Tashard Choice was also there. So things moving in a good direction for Texas and Fasusi. Now I want to bump back to a couple of stops yesterday. One totally expected, one interesting to me. Riley Pettijohn. Sark and Ryan Day, I posted on Twitter a photo of both of those guys. They came, I think, within an hour of each other to McKinney High, which I thought was funny because Pettijohn had a Texas hoodie on for Sark's visit and then had a gray hoodie on for the Ohio State visit. So I don't know if he goes to his car and has one for every school, but Sark was at McKinney to see Riley Pettijohn, former teammate of Xavier Filsaime, the freshman safety at Texas, who I think is going to be a big-time player. But Pettijohn, 6'2", 6'2 and a half, 210, long wingspan guy, really pursues the football, a natural linebacker with the instincts for the position, I'll say, after talking to many guys at McKinney about him. Everybody in the country's after him, right? Going in, he was at the January 20th Junior Day. CJ, I don't know if you had a chance to speak with him or not after. I'll let you get into that. But going into January, I was told Texas, Florida State, Auburn were really the 3 schools. A&M obviously gets a visit, right? Junior Day visit. but the recruitment's going to expand. Everybody's coming in. Ohio State obviously is making their run, but Pettijohn is one of the top 2 or 3 ranked linebacker prospects in the country.
In the state, you could absolutely have the conversation for him being the #1 guy. You know, him and Elijah Bo Barnes out of Skyline, it's going back and forth. Jonah Williams, if he's willing to play linebacker, that's another conversation. But there's a lot of talent right now. And with Riley Pettijohn, you mentioned that recruitment expanding, Michigan coming in, Georgia coming in. You expect the teams like Oklahoma, A&M, and the 2 that you mentioned, Auburn and Florida State, obviously to be a big part of this recruitment as well. Texas is doing a good job of bookending the month of January and now into February by getting FaceTime with him. You know, the visit day with him on the junior day was big. That's with 100 other people. You know, Texas does get the opportunity, specifically with Coach Sarkisian, to walk in to McKinney High and say, hey, Xavier's doing a hell of a job down here on campus during the winter workouts. How are you doing? Because we want you to join him next fall or next winter. So I think that's really encouraging. And, you know, with Pettijohn, you're going to see, you know, with the new rule, it wouldn't be unlikely to see more than 5 official visits sometime this spring or summer, simply because he's been that coveted and he is that talented already at the linebacker spot.
And you brought up a great point. Look, the state of Texas at linebacker has been hit or miss some years, and I think it's just spread football, the evolution of spread football in the state over the years. The linebacker class in the state in 2025, I think is borderline special in terms of depth. And we'll get into those guys in the future because I think more guys will pop onto the radar for Texas. I love Jonathan Cunningham at North Crowley. I think he's very underrated, very under-recruited. That's a guy I'm really watching to blow up this spring. And Coach Nansen was by there to take a look at him recently, by the way. But Elijah Barnes and Pettijohn are the 2 names. And literally everybody's stopping in those 2 schools to see him, Dallas, Skyline, McKinney. I mean, I've posted photos of Venables, Ryan Day, Sark. I mean, you just go down Mike Norvell. You go down the list. All those guys have been to see Barnes. All those same guys have been to McKinney High. So there's 2 linebackers who are elite nationally. Sark and Banks were by Skyline last week, obviously. But there's 2 very, very high-end linebackers. The other guy in Dallas, CJ, that caught my attention was Khalil Lockett. By the way, tell everybody how to pronounce the high school because I mess it up.
Saxe High School.
Okay, see, I say Soxie, but I'm Deep East Texas with bad grammar. So, okay, same school that produced Devin Duvernay, right? Congrats to Devin on a good run with the Ravens this year, obviously. This is interesting to me because Texas invited Lockett to January 20th, Junior Day. He did not attend. He went to A&M. He's been a couple other places, but it also, that tells you how much Sark and the staff, Chris Jackson, they actually like Lockett, that he was one of the guys that didn't show up for Junior Day, but they made it a point to go be seen and talk to him and show some face. That tells you that he may be a little higher on the board than some Texas fans are thinking right now.
He was certainly a very early evaluation by the Texas staff. Texas had him on campus twice last year, once in the spring, summer months, and then again heading into August. So he's been to campus. He's familiar with campus and Steve Sarkisian and Chris Jackson. I think he kind of differs from the mold that we've seen Texas pursue in the portal this year in terms of the speed, kind of smaller guys. He's 6'2". He can still run very well down the field. Doesn't necessarily have the tremendous track times that'll catch your eye off a first look, but you watch him play, and Gerry, I know you can test this, the body control and the leaping ability to go up and get the football is special. He's a big-time playmaker.
It's A.D. Mitchell-like in a way. I'm not saying he's going to be a first-round pick, but he does have some of that same body control and timing when he leaves his feet.
Yes, and so Texas is very, very well familiar with what he is as a prospect. And I think your point was correct. Seeing him in person with all of these prospects here in the DFW era probably gives you a good indication of where he sits right now on the Texas board at receiver. And obviously there's already familiarity there, being able to build upon that going into really the spring season when, you know, kind of these intermittent kind of visits will pop up during the spring football season is going to be important to see if he's able to get back to Austin during that time.
Yeah, and so now we're going to transition. We're going to hit the last thing we're going to hit on today, and we're going to have a lot of recruiting stuff in the future for you guys. CJ and we're going to talk about all of it. Let's talk about where Sark was earlier this week because I thought it was interesting on a number of levels here. So he was at O'Galley in Melbourne to see Brandon Brown. Let's start there because that's interesting because Kenny Baker, when a coach is hired, you have to go through compliance. The school has to do all the paperwork before you can go hit the road. So the timing wasn't there for the new D-line coach, Kenny Baker, to make the trip to O'Galley with Jeff Banks and Sark. But I thought it was imperative, paramount, important, whatever you want to say, that they showed face to Brandon Brown in January. If not, they stood to lose the commitment, lose a lot of ground. Because I don't care where Brandon Brown's ranked. I've seen him in person, and he's underrated nationally. I'm just going to tell everybody that right now. He's a freakish talent at that position. He doesn't have freakish size, but he's a freakish talent. He's underrated. Everybody in the country is coming through there. A&M, Sean Spencer, the D-line coach, who was at Florida as a prior relationship, was there yesterday. But how important do you think it was for Sark and Banks to be there and show that FaceTime with Brandon Brown? Because he goes through a period where he doesn't talk to Texas for a while because they don't have a D-line coach. Bo Davis, he talks to Bo Davis at LSU, but he doesn't talk to Texas. So that was right. Maybe as important a visit as Texas has had in January.
I'm right there with you. I don't have a thesaurus big enough, or I guess within my reach right now, to find the superlatives to give Brandon Brown, but he's a special prospect. Yep. And we were asked the question, what's a successful season right now for Kenny Baker in year one? It's holding on to Brandon Brown. He's that special of a prospect. And I don't think it's any secret that Texas went out there with their A team of recruiters of Steve Sarkisian, Jeff Banks, and Tashard Choice joined them as well on the road. There's a reason for that. And I know Kenny Baker's still on the road. He probably hasn't been down to Austin yet to set up the office and
he didn't even get to meet Glasscock. He didn't even have time to meet Glasscock. It's over.
No, I bet he was stopping at academies and Walmarts outside of these high schools to get Texas gear to walk into high school. So until you're able to build that relationship and kind of bridge that gap to the new defensive line coach, Texas showing all the love that they can with really the three best recruiters on the staff in my eyes in terms of going out and getting the big, tier one guys on your list. Texas is doing just that. And like you said, it's the most important visit that they've had so far. And going on to that trip around them, obviously stopping at seeing KJ Lacey at Saraland and Emory Winston as well at Calhoun. Very impressive job by Sarkisian to adjust on the fly there.
Yeah, and I'll throw a couple of nuggets out there. I talked to somebody close to Brandon Brown's recruitment about an hour ago, let's call it. He plays for Cali Power 7-on-7 team. So they're going to play in Texas in 7-on-7 tournaments twice. He's going to be on campus probably in March for a spring practice. That's the way it's looking right now. Obviously, that late June official visit's what Texas will be targeting. We've already talked about that. Multiple guys now. We're already starting to hear that last weekend in June, just like last summer, that last weekend in June is what Texas is going to target. They're going to target that final official visit because July and August are the announcement months. June, that last weekend in June is going to be big. We expect Brandon Brown on campus this spring and again in June for an official visit. And he hasn't been on campus before. He has been to A&M. He was at an A&M camp last summer. So it'll be big. Obviously, you want in that recruitment, you want his brother and his mom to make the trip. His older sister's a really good basketball player, play college basketball somewhere in the state of Florida. But mom, the brother who's a high school basketball coach, was a big-time player. They're going to be key in getting on campus with that recruitment. You mentioned Amari Winston. And here's what I wanted to bring up about Amari Winston, CJ, is one, since he didn't make it to the January 20th junior day, he has high school basketball. Obviously, getting out to see him was big. I thought it was interesting that they went to see Keati Armstrong at Jasper. Sark did as well. Because I think that's a great blend at tight end possibly in this class. If Texas can beat out A&M and a bunch of others for Armstrong, Ty Anthony Smith's former teammate there at Jasper Bulldogs. Keati Armstrong is going to be 6'5", 260 and athletic, long arms. He's a big dude. I posted a picture on Twitter with him and Sark, and he dwarfed Sark. You would think he was a defensive tackle in that picture, but he's only 6'5", 240 right now. But a good blend there at tight end, possibly.
Yeah, I love it because I hate calling kids that are great early on in their high school careers that receive the ball very well, kind of that hybrid mix. But for Emory Winston, you don't see that height that you saw with, obviously, Coyote Armstrong. So it's interesting the way that they're looking to build this tight end room in the sense that you have, a guy like Gunnar Helm, a guy like Jatavian Sanders at all times, but also having the opportunity to have them mix and match and be plus blockers and threats down the field. So I do think they go out, they build off of one another very well. I'm a big fan of Emory Winston, had over 900 receiving yards this past season for his high school in Calhoun. So, I mean, if you're able to walk in and grab two very important tight end pieces, and as we've talked about, tight end is, if not the most important for a Steve Sarkisian offense, right behind quarterback, it's that number 2 spot of most important, because it blends and mixes what you want to do in the running game and also stretches the field vertically and causes mixed matches with the linebackers and the safety. So a lot going on, and Sarkisian very, very much covets that position. Two really talented prospects, and I love how they can complement each other very well there.
And look, I'll say this: if you're a Texas fan that likes high school football and you live in the Atlanta area, get on up to Calhoun next year. I went to a game at Calhoun years ago when a guy named Von Bell, former safety in the NFL, played there. A great place for Friday night football. So Calhoun High, go watch Amari Winston this year, Texas fans, if you live in that Atlanta area. It's an hour, maybe 3 in traffic right now in Atlanta. I don't even know, but it's a great place for Friday night football. All right, last but not least, KJ Lacey. Obviously, it's your quarterback committed in your class, and Alabama's coming after him, and Auburn's coming after him, and they're not going to give up, and they shouldn't. If they gave up on him, they should. They're not doing their jobs. Obviously, if another quarterback commits, then that's when things do move on. But Sarkisian and A.J. Milway had been scheduled to go see KJ Lacey for a while with the Ryan Williams recruitment in the balance. They were there before Williams obviously recommitted to Alabama. Sark and Milway were there Tuesday. It was after an awards afternoon in Montgomery for some of the players of the year in the state, offensive players of the year, quarterback of the year, all those good things, which obviously KJ Lacey was up for a number of those awards. But Sark and Milway continue. They were at his state championship game. They continue to let KJ Lacey know whether Ryan Williams is at Alabama or Texas or Auburn, it's going to be Alabama. KJ, you're our guy in 2025. Texas has never backed off of that, because what's happened with this recruitment for Texas fans that maybe are just kind of getting adjusted to some of these 2025 guys. When Quinn announced he was coming back, that's when, the colleges smell a little, blood in the water type of situation, right? Hold on. Quinn's coming back. That means if Arch stays, that sets his timeline back. So that's colleges are coming in, feeding frenzy, right? Telling KJ Lacey, hey, man, when are you going to get on the field in Austin? Yeah, if Arch is coming back, he's not going to be a one-year starter and just go pro. That's not what he's going to do. So Texas has been working through that with KJ Lacey. But kind of, CJ, talk about the importance of Sark and Milway in that relationship with KJ Lacey when other schools are still coming after him.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of a re-recruitment of a kid that you already have committed, because you have this new development with Quinn Ewers coming back to kind of reaffirm KJ that, hey, we still covet you. We still see a high path for you, and we want you to be a Texas Longhorn. That's what they're trying to fight off with Auburn and Alabama and some of these other programs coming in basically and saying, you know what, you could be the guy from day one. And there may not be a guarantee from that, but Sarkisian now will have the opportunity to say, well, we're going to send a few kids to the NFL and you're going to follow suit. KJ, I actually got to see it in Lockhart for a 7-on-7 tournament in the middle of January. He came in, I believe that was January 13th. It was the week before the junior day, and he was able to take his 7-on-7 team around the campuses, saw a few of the coaches, had a good time on campus, then told me basically, well, I really want to come back next week. But at the time, he was scheduled to come back with Ryan Williams on the 27th for the official visit. So, I can't make it back to Austin 3 weeks in a row, but I really want to be on campus for the junior day to help recruit and build this 25 class. I like this. I want to be back on campus as much as possible. Thought that was really encouraging. And at the same time that I was with him, Sarkisian signed his contract extension at Texas. And so it obviously locked in Sarkisian at Texas for this foreseeable future, in which there's a smile from ear to ear there from KJ Lacey. He was very excited. He loves the Sarkisian offense and how he develops quarterbacks. So that's all important. And especially when it comes to fending off potential foes, keeping the head man here is going to be a big player in this recruitment.
And look, and to your point, so here's the interesting thing is, does an Alabama who will make a run at KJ Lacey, does that timeline set up better for him? I don't think it does. Look, Jalen Milroe's back another year. Austin Mack transfers from Washington, which, by the way, if you take a quarterback transfer from Washington to Alabama, and that means Julian Sand's going to leave and transfer, that means you're extremely high on the guy that you just brought with you from Washington. So that's first.
Absolutely.
That also means he's on the same timeline as Arch Manning. He's going to sit this year behind Jalen Milroe. He gets 2 years to groom under Kalen DeBoer in that offense, and then he's going to take over at Alabama. So that situation's totally the same as Texas. Auburn's situation, we'll see how that plays out. They're trying hard to flip Julian Lewis, who is reclassified from 26 to 25. And so that is a prize recruit that USC's fighting hard to, against Auburn and Georgia to hang on to. Obviously, that recruitment means more for Georgia now with Raiola going to Nebraska. So a lot of moving parts. KJ Lacey solid to Texas. I heard the meeting went really well. Does that mean he won't show up on another campus? We can't say that. It's recruiting, right? And there's a long way to go in this process. But Texas had a great meeting with KJ Lacey Tuesday. Things continue to be positive in that recruitment. Again, before we get out of here, we ran a little long, but CJ and I, we're going to be doing this a lot moving forward. I want to take a second for Mark Saunders, the sole sponsor of the Recruiting Breakdown. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some good news. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you need to help keep tabs on protection of all your stuff. Everything from your home, car, and boat to your motorcycle, RV, and even the ATV. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Again, 512-218-8571. All right, CJ, we're going to be doing this a lot, man. It was great. Our first recruiting breakdown. I look forward to I'm going to be hitting the road next week, seeing what we can dig up and come up with. We got signing day next week, which is probably going to be pretty uneventful for us. We're just going to be rehashing the 24 class and portal and what could happen moving forward. But again, for Texas fans, we're going to get you acquainted with the 2025 guys. We're going to get you up to speed on all these guys. But mark June 25th through 27th. That's going to be the big official visit weekend for the Horns. Marcus Harris, the 4-star out of Mater Dei. Michael Fasusi. I'll throw another one out. Tyler Thomas from Dickinson, I bet, comes in that weekend. So there's starting to be some names associated with that weekend, even if they're not public yet. So that's the weekend to know. And CJ and I'll keep you up to date on all things Texas recruiting, high school and portal. Thanks for joining us.